Welcome back, or welcome if you're just joining us. This is the France 24 debate. We're discussing Muammar Gaddafi's downfall and talking about it with Sir Richard Dalton, the former British ambassador to Libya, who's now with the British think tank Chatham House. Also with us, Captain Philip Stoner, former Deputy UK Defence Attaché here in Paris. Chris Moore, France 24 reporter, who is off to Libya in the morning, as it were. And from London, Lindsay German of the Stop the War Coalition. Thanks, all of you, for being back with us. Just before the break, we were discussing the issue we were discussing the issue of was it worth it to intervene? And critics at the outset of the intervention, of the NATO intervention in this country, accusing President Sarkozy of taking his orders from French philosopher Bernard-Henri Lévy, who pleaded for that intervention ahead of the UN resolution we were discussing. Now, 5 months on, Paris says it now feels vindicated. Let's listen to the foreign minister.
We've made it very clear that we're working within the remit of international law. So this is the result. We spoke of not getting bogged down. You remember it was going to be in 6 months that we would reach our objectives. Some say it took too long, but we've demonstrated that we are determined and discerning in the decisions we've made.
Now, if we look at a couple of the comments from the France 24 debate Facebook page, there's quite an argument going on here. Andrew writes, "We had no choice after the threat made to civilians in Benghazi. If we had done nothing, there'd be 1 million refugees in Egypt and probably a similar number of bodies in the Mediterranean." Now, Don from Harare disagrees. He says NATO should have left it to the Libyan people. The rebels will form a Western-imposed government. Richard Dalton, how difficult will it now be for that transitional national council really to be a legitimate force?
It will be difficult, but they are making a good start with the constitutional declaration they have announced, providing for the steps leading to a pluralistic Libya that is better governed in accordance with law and human rights and freedom. So they now have to attract the support of the overwhelming majority in order to make those aspirations real. And from my experience of Eastern Libya and from my time in Libya itself as a whole, I believe that they will be able to do so. There are several dangers. One is that the military forces who are in the process of defeating Gaddafi's forces on the battlefield will be hard to control. Another is that there will be rivalries within the National Transitional Council itself. But I don't believe that these are insuperable.
And drawing from your experience when you were in the country, you were in a country that didn't have political parties, where tribal affiliations run very strong. How do you basically do it from scratch?
I don't believe that tribal affiliations run very strong. This has become one of the many myths of the last 6 months. The primary loyalty of Libyans is to their family and to their country. They know the tribe they come from in many cases, not all, but they're not a people that lives in the countryside or in the desert. They live largely in cities and in towns. And there, as in other parts of the world, tribal loyalties are regarded as thoroughly out of date. The only circumstances in which people would rally to a tribe is if there is a prolonged period of anarchy in Libya, with all forms of hope for better social and political organization lost. And that is simply not going to happen. We should not underestimate the sense of public duty and loyalty which Libyans have to their country. And in the light of the dreadful experiences they've been through, particularly in the main cities, in the course of fighting Colonel Gaddafi's forces, I believe that they will rally to the opportunity which their fighters on the ground have now given them for a new start.
Chris Moore, when you were in Benghazi, we know there's a lot of talk about how Benghazi is proud of being different from Tripoli. Did you have the sense of a Libya the way it's portrayed there by Richard Dalton as one nation indivisible?
I think there's quite a lot of truth in what he says, in the sense that regional or tribal identities, they could be important. It could be, for example, if you're French, you might regard yourself first of all as Breton, from Brittany, but you're still French. And I think it's perhaps a similar situation in Libya. I mean, it was that there's a strong sense of national pride, at least in Benghazi. You see that now when there's a lot of demands from within the council itself saying, look, the minute that Gaddafi is gone, this is a Libyan gig for Libyan people. If you like, they don't want any more intervention from NATO. When you hear figures inside the National Council saying that, no, we're not sure that we're going to hand Saif al-Islam over to the ICC yet. We want him perhaps to be tried here in Libya, and the same for Gaddafi. There's a strong sense of not necessarily nationalism but national pride about it. They acknowledge that NATO helped. They acknowledge that they couldn't have won without NATO, but they want this from now on to be a Libyan operation for Libyan people.
All right, and for the time being, the Transitional National Council predicting a speedy return to normal in Tripoli. We can hear one of their military spokesmen.
A plan was agreed with groups inside of Tripoli to secure the city, to secure local and international organizations, and also to secure all private and public establishments. I think after today, and after the total freedom of the next few days, life will get back to normal.
Lindsay German, are you reassured when you hear that statement?
Not particularly, because I think what the most likely outcome in Libya is that there will be a government established, which is a pro-Western government. It will be probably a fairly weak government for the reasons that some of your other contributors have already said, that there are many differences among the rebels, from Islamist to pro-American figures within it. So there will be a whole number of differences. It will be quite a weak government. And to be perfectly honest, we've been here before. This is what we had in Afghanistan. This is the situation which still pertains in Afghanistan, and that it doesn't mean, just because this stage of the fighting is over, it doesn't mean necessarily a war is over. I think we would all hope that it would be over, but I'm not sure it's at all the kind of the glib scenario that some government spokesmen are really talking about. And therefore, I think that when we look at it, the whole question of the intervention will shape it. It's very interesting what Chris says, that many Libyans say to him, we wanted NATO to help us, now we don't want them to be around. And that's exactly the sentiment that I've had from many Libyans here in London. But the truth of the matter is they won't find it very easy to get rid of NATO. They won't find it very easy to get rid of the Western powers. David Cameron has said we've already had plans about how we stabilise the situation. The British do not have official troops on the ground, nor do any of the other
I'm sorry,
NATO powers.
Lindsay German, I'm sorry, I'm going to have to interrupt you for a second, because we're going to go to Tripoli, and France 24's Catherine Norris-Trent. Catherine, can you give us an idea of the situation at the outset of the program? We heard cheers, we heard gunfire. Which way is it going in Tripoli right now?
Well, it's a very confused situation indeed. There's a lot of shooting going on around. We're hearing gunfire. We're hearing heavy artillery fire as well. There are snipers stationed on roofs. In fact, in the residential area where we're now staying, that there's the carrying on, and groups of residents are out on the street trying to protect their local area. The rebels had rolled victoriously into the former Green Square. Now the rebels have taken up the pre-Gaddafi named Martyrs Square. They rolled in there victoriously, guns blazing, firing into the air, singing pre-Gaddafi national anthem. But they were driven out in the early hours of this morning, in fact, by some pro-Gaddafi loyalists, whether official troops or militias, but in pickup trucks, who drove right through Green Square and started shooting at those the rebels who'd been celebrating. So there, there was then that ensued in a gun battle and drove the rebels out. So there, a real example right in the centre of Tripoli, that the rebels have not consolidated their gain on the capital, and that basically it is still fighting here, and the situation is very chaotic indeed.
All right, and as we speak to you, Catherine, we can maybe call up a map of the capital, Tripoli, and on that map see that the situation you were mentioning there a moment ago, sort of the to and fro situation. Catherine, the people you've been speaking to, what's their feeling? Are they apprehending that this could go on for a while, or do they feel that though this is the last throes of resistance from the pro-Gaddafi supporters?
People here really do fear that this could go on for some time. One Libyan woman I spoke to earlier today said, well, we're a very patient people and we've waited for 6 months already, so we're ready to wait a little more. And people are expecting this now to go on for some time, because it seems that the fight is between scattered gunmen stationed on rooftops and other gunmen stationed around town or driving around in pickup trucks. So it's the kind of battle which actually, just in military terms even, would take a great deal of time to clear out entirely of the city. People are saying, though, that they've lost so many people already. So many of their friends and neighbours have been killed in this uprising. There's a real sense of fear and of sadness that the capital is once again in the grips of violence.
All right, Catherine Norris-Trent, thanks for joining us there from Tripoli, the capital, where you've been working around the clock for France 24. Philip Stoner, Catherine's account there, it sort of flies into the face of talk of jubilation. We're perhaps getting ahead of ourselves.
I mean, clearly there's an issue that you now have the last remaining segments of Gaddafi's close forces, the ones who are highly trained, extremely loyal, right next to him, if indeed he is still there, in the center of Libya, of the capital of Tripoli. And about 20% of Tripoli, apparently, from what I understand, is still under his control. So it is inevitable you will have these sort of hard pockets of resistance. But the point is, as far as the rebels are concerned, the situation is now contained, and although it's not completely under control, it is not going to go any further geographically. They can't move any further north. They can't move any further east or west. It is actually all heading back onto Tripoli at the moment. So this will probably go on for a few days more, in my estimation. But I think at the moment that, bearing in mind the problems that they've had so far, bearing in mind that the rebels are now in a position to start cutting off water, electricity, power, all the different things which you need to keep going if indeed you are on the rooftop, sniping and so forth, there's a certain inevitability about what is going to happen.
Richard Dalton, your reaction to what Catherine just told us about the fighting?
I don't think there's any new information there. It's going to take a little while, but I do think there's a clear trend. But it's very hard to know what's going on.
When we look at the international reactions this Monday, we note that even though everyone says it's the end of Gaddafi, we also note a certain degree of wariness over the Transitional National Council's ability to now, well, hold it all together. Let's take a listen, if you will, to the head of NATO.
NATO is ready to work with the Libyan people and with the Transitional National Council, which holds a great responsibility. They must make sure that the transition is smooth and inclusive, that the country stays united, and that the future is founded on reconciliation and respect for human rights.
I spoke to Chairman Jalil last week and will be speaking to him again today to agree with him the importance of respecting human rights, avoiding reprisals, and making sure that all parts of Libya can share in the future of that country.
And compounding that underlying wariness, the lead editorial in this Monday's edition of The Guardian, saying there's plenty of evidence of common sense, democratic instinct, idealism, and decency, as well as professional competence waiting to be tapped in Libya. Experience, however, shows such elements can also be outflanked and wasted as more extreme forces scramble for advantage. And Richard Dalton, let me come back to you again on this. Which way, how will we know which way the pendulum is swinging? What's going to be the acid test now?
The acid test is whether the National Transitional Council, having pacified Tripoli, attracts the consent and the cooperation of the overwhelming majority of Libyans, and that in consequence they are able to restore normal life, get supplies into the country, get the police back on the streets, resume supply of fuel to Tripoli, etc., and provide for resumption of good work in hospitals. All these things. That's the acid test. But it's easy to argue round and round as to whether the glass is half full or the glass is half empty. What The Guardian wrote could perfectly well have been written about the difficulty of getting around the problems caused by extremists in many a democracy. So yes, obviously, everyone's got to put their shoulder to the wheel. And I don't think there's any danger that somehow NATO is going to force itself on the Libyan people. I believe David Cameron, for one, when he says that this is going to be a Libyan-owned and a Libyan-led process. And if he should be tempted to go beyond that, then we've got democratic institutions ourselves to pull him back. But I don't think it'll be necessary.
One final point before we go, Philip Stoner. NATO will definitely not be sending ground troops by what the accounts of all of the heads of state. How much strain has this put on the alliance?
I think it's put a certain amount of strain, certainly politically, but they managed to find a way around it. And, I think the alliance can be criticised for many, many things. But one has to admit, and I come back to something that Lindsay said earlier on, the alliance has moved forward from Afghanistan and Iraq. And what they've learned here, and I'm not a spokesman for the alliance at all, but what I would say is they've learned that, there's a certain amount we can do, there's a certain amount we can't do. We can actually help from the point of view of using air power. It's a very blunt weapon, but it can be helpful. But keeping troops back and not putting troops on the ground makes this situation different to Afghanistan, makes this situation different to Iraq.
One final word, Lindsay German.
Well, I think to see Iraq and Afghanistan as success stories, I think is a very, very limited view. I think many people would regard the Afghan war as even worse than it has been at any other time. Certainly more people are dying there. And Iraq, there are still 50,000 troops, American troops there. Now, when we talk about, the great success of this mission, let's wait and see. Let's see what it looks like in a few months' time. And let's remember that this has already cost hundreds of millions of pounds at the same time where the British and the French and the American governments are telling their own people that there is no money for welfare and education here. So there are lots and lots of questions here which have not been resolved at all. Not resolved.
Lindsay German, I want to thank you for joining us from London. I want to thank Richard Dalton for being with us from Richmond, England. Philip Stoner, Chris Moore as well. And thank you for being with us for the France 24 debate.